Where?
Hi.
Oh, yeah.
I have two questions. Last year we played Your Perfect Days as a part of our state international film festival, along with Chorus Maggie's Fallen Leaves. Those two films were the popular film during that time. And what I have to ask was, I really liked the film Perfect Days. For me, it was about a man living in his present life and in a humble livelihood and all that. I even got tattooed that Kondawa Konda Imawa Ima dialogue in my right deltoid. I'll show you later. So, my real question is, for me it worked very well because it was a simple film and you showed that much simple and old school filmmaking still can work. But one of my friends shared a different perspective on these Perfect Days. He said that the Perfect Days film, it's about it's a sad and tragic story of a man who gave up on living, stopped fighting, and trashed his life in a washing closet. The reason he
Why do you think it's sad and tragic?
yeah, I'm coming on to that. Because he's trying to live in the present, but the past is still haunt him. He is sitting on a bench and looking at the sun and the Komorebi, and he is laughing at it. But what he asked was, if the past hit him, will he able to laugh on that? So I really like to know your perspective on this thing. And I also have one add-on question I will ask later.
So what is the question?
I mean, he's living in the past, basically, and then he's reflecting on that past. He's talking about.
Well, I tend to disagree. I think, yes, he is living in the present tense and quite radically. He's quite radically in the now and here. And then, because he's getting the visit of his niece, and then his sister appears, and out of a sudden his former life is very close in front of him and he's confronted to it. And he does shed a tear, yes, but I'm not so sure why he's crying. I think he's not sad. I think maybe it's not for himself. Maybe he's sad for his sister, or maybe he's sad that they are so far apart. But I think one thing you can take for granted: he's not unhappy with his decision. He's not unhappy of being who he is and of doing what he is. So, and especially I hope I brought that out at the end of the film, that he doesn't want to go back and that he's happy with the life he has chosen, because this is a man who has chosen the life he's leading, and he has chosen to be happy with little, and he is really able to do his work as good as he can possibly do it. And there's a thing in Japanese tradition, especially with craftspeople, they are very proud of what they're doing. And even if sometimes they do the same pot every day, they invest everything they have every day into that pot. And that's how he's working. And I don't think he's sad and tragic. I think everybody else is. So now I'm really curious about the second question.
Adding on to that, my friend said he fled his life, he fled his family, and he gave up on living. That sort of thing. He created an imaginary world where he chose to escape his unhappiness and his sorrows. I'm leaving anyway. My second question is: we all can see that Wim Wenders is king of the road. Would you really accept the title? But for me personally...
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I'm not a king.
So, if you can...
I'm the beggar of the road.
Sir, road and cinema, it brought me the name of Abbas Kiarostami. We have many filmmakers of such kind. Even our Malayalam was one, John Abraham. He made a film named Amma Ariyan, which can be translated as Report to Mother, which was also a political road movie. And there is Walter Sellas.
Yes.
Even plenty of filmmakers are there. If you can pass this title to someone else, another filmmaker, who would that be?
But I think I've been more on the road than any of them. And I think I did each and every shot a living person can produce with a car. There is no shot ever done in the history of cinema on cars that I didn't already do. So, but you're totally right. I mean, Shivendra, what did you think? Well, I don't think you have to be a king. The Beggar of the Road is also a very nice title. Next time.
We have to ask Tisha, because she's the one who chose the title.
Well, she's good at what she's doing.
My question is about misinterpretations. Right here, sir, like in front of you. So, your films are understated, minimalistic, introspective. That also creates room for misinterpretations. I want to know if there is a kind of misinterpretation from the audience that have troubled you a lot, so that you were going back and checking with if you want to tell the story in the same way you wanted to. So, is there such kind of an incident?
Well, it happens all the time that, because my films are quite open to interpretation, they are not a closed system. They don't tell you what you see is what you get, but they leave a lot of things open in the end as well, and in between the lines, because the film is also a little bit like a book that you read, and in any book that you read, a lot of the space between the lines is up to you to fill it. And I like to think of my films as leaving a lot of emptiness in between the shots, so to speak, that you can dream yourself into it and interpret it and fill it with your own experience. So, and that of course is a little risky, because some people, for instance, think that my films are very much about alienation and are very much about loneliness and all that. Yes, my films have dealt with loneliness, but they're never pessimistic or describing loneliness as a negative thing. They're always trying to come to the point where people realize, yes, people are lonely today, but being lonely is a chance and can be a blessing. Just if you understand how to be lonely or how to be lonesome, and that you can only be a person good for society if you're also able to be alone. If you're not able to be alone, then you're also not really able to be with others. So my films are a little complex in some of what they're trying to tell, and so especially in America, I'm being very much tied to the idea. He's a filmmaker about angst and alienation. That's what they boil me down to. He's a specialist in angst and alienation, and I couldn't be further removed from that. So sometimes you get misunderstood, especially in cultures where they try to define everything, where they only know that everything can only be what they think it is. Luckily, India is not like this, as I noticed.
But there is a thing which you spoke about in Mumbai about being private and personal in your films, which I thought was very interesting. I mean,
well, yes, I can talk about that. That sort of belongs into the context. Yes, thank you, Shivi.
Yeah.
Because, let me just finish this. My films, some of them are very personal, and some of them are personal in a way that I think I can connect people, because I feel personal experiences can be accepted and seen by people, and they can themselves have a personal experience. And I very much try to make the distinction between being personal and between being private. I never ever try to have a private moment in a film of mine. And if I see movies, for instance, any sex scene in any movie I feel is way too private. I think two people cannot be more private than having sex, and I don't want to see that in a movie. I close my eyes, I look away, I'm embarrassed, because I'm attending something that should remain private. So I make a big distinction between private and personal, and I think it's an important distinction to make. And in today's culture, the invasion of privacy has become almost the rule. We all get on Facebook and Instagram and everything, and they constantly cross the border between personal and private. So that also in movies, people now start expecting private things because they like to hear about movie stars, but about their private thing, not about their personal thing. So I think private should remain what belongs to each and everybody, and it has nothing to do in movies, I feel. Personal experiences, yes. Personal experiences are the only ones that we can really share. Everything general is what doesn't really count, I feel.
Any questions?
Yeah. I'm sitting here.
Where?
Yeah, here. Here.
He's there.
Yeah.
Right. No, there. Right at the end. There.
It's your turn right afterwards. We have the right afterwards. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I want to ask you about you are interested in becoming a fine artist, and become a filmmaker now. But I see your films referring artists like Afternoon. I see one short film. Then Edward Hopper you mentioned, and your great film. We are going to see the Anselm Kiefer is one of my admired artists, and I want to ask you why Anselm Kiefer and why 3D?
Well, I first discovered 3D some 15 years ago when it helped me make a film about a woman who worked in a field that she invented herself. One of the few people in the 20th century who came up and invented a whole art form by herself. Before there was ballet and there was theater, and then she came up with a whole new art form called dance theater. I didn't know much about her. I encountered her a little bit by chance because my girlfriend at the time thought I should see a spectacle by Pina Bausch, and I thought, no, I don't want to see that. It's ballet and I don't care. So I was almost forced to go see it, and I sat in a dance theater play by Pina Bausch, and I realized 10 minutes later that I was weeping. My shirt was wet. I was crying like I've never cried before in my life, and this had never happened to me in a movie, but it happened to me in a play by Pina Bausch. So I was stunned, and I realized she had invented an art form that really concerned me and that touched me. And I wanted to make a film on her, without her, about the secret that she knew of moving people so much. And I got to know her, we became friends, and she said, Wim, yes, I like the idea that you want to make a film about my art. Please, let's do it soon. And then I sat there and I thought about it, and I realized, as a filmmaker, as much I was moved myself, I didn't know how I would capture it on film. I didn't know what it was, but something was missing too that my cameras could not do. And the more I imagined myself trying to do justice to her work, the less I felt I was able to. So finally I told Pina, you have to wait, Pina, I'm not quite ready yet. I have to figure out how to do it. And that became a running joke. Whenever I met her and I saw every new piece of her, and I really was attached to her work and I loved it. And each time I saw it, she looked at me, Wim, are you ready? I said, not quite yet. And finally she didn't even ask me anymore. She just raised her eyebrow, and I shook my head at it, because I did not know how to do it. I could not imagine that my cameras could enter her art. Until 10 years later, a new medium showed up, and it was called digital 3D. And when I saw it for the first time, I realized, wow, this was what I had been waiting for. I hadn't known what I was waiting for, but I knew I was waiting for something that enabled me to be in the kingdom of Pina Bausch and in the space of her actors. And all of a sudden, the third dimension was added to my tools, and I knew then, now I could do it. So I realized in that film, and it's going to play here as well for those who haven't seen it, I realized it was a very powerful tool, and it enabled the audience to be in a different way with what was happening on the screen. First of all, in 3D, there is no more screen. I mean, before the movie starts, there's a screen, it's a silver screen, but when the movie starts, it dissolves and you could look through the screen, and you can see things in front and behind, and it's a much more complete experience because you have the whole space between you and infinity that opens up in front of you. It's not just the screen. The information you take into your brain is many times higher than the information you see on a regular flat screen. And as you have to construct space in your own brain, because on that screen you see two images and it looks like out of focus, but your brain produces space, and because you have a left eye and a right eye in the camera, and that's what you see. So your brain works in overtime and actually uses parts of it that are, I'm sorry to say, just not active in regular movies. Your brain works more, and you're more immersed, and you're more concerned. And that is a miracle of 3D. Actually, it's a scandal that most movies don't use the potential of it. Most movies make you believe that it's just a tool for action and adventure and the whole world blowing up, but the opposite is true. It is especially suited to show reality in a much deeper and concentrated way. You see much more and you're more involved, and therefore it has a whole different poetic quality that films were always trying to reach, but they didn't have it. And unfortunately only very few directors used it at its full potential, and I'm sort of a little bit of a missionary to tell people 3D can do something else that you've never seen. And it is powerful, and it is a very realistic and ultra-realistic and very poetic medium. And I also thought that in order to approach the art of Anselm Kiefer, who is one of the great living artists, and if you see the film you realize why. And the film is not really like anything you know as movies on artists. It's really more than that. It's an experience. You go through an experience when you see the film. And as the medium of 3D allows you to have a different experience than normally in a theater, that's why I used it, so you could be in his space. You could share this, you could be there in a different way. So I think 3D is something very powerful, and I'm sure it will not be forgotten, and I'm sure it's going to come back, because if it's continued to be used as it's now, we don't need it. It's hopeless. As an action movie, you have to pay more, but that's the only thing that is the added value, is that you have to pay more. But that as a medium it can do so much more than two-dimensional cameras is something that will still hopefully happen, because I'm convinced it can do miracles. So.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Where are you?
I'm here.
Oh, right here.
Yes.
Finally, you get the mic.
Thank you for the masterclass. Really meaningful thoughts and energy that you're sharing with us. And I wanted to say, the way you touch the core of the characters through your films, and also the stories, which are so raw and real, as if you're committed to the truth yourself as a person, it can be seen in your films, how truth is constantly there and it's not really leaving the film. And as you also mentioned, for instance, with Pina, you were not feeling it, I think, in the moment, because the truth maybe was not revealed yet, so you couldn't really start working on it that time. So time also does not control when we touch the truth. And throughout your life, also the interviews you give, the way you shoot your film, the energy you exude is so calm and so constant. In everything I've seen, there's a constant of you. How have you touched your own truth, and how are you maintaining it so that it's constant, the way you exude it? And I also have another question, more technical, but...
Well, let's stay to that very simple question. I hope I can do justice to your question. I start at a different angle. I want to start with the idea, what is a camera, and what do you do when you have a film camera and you film something? Because whenever you set up your camera to shoot a landscape or a city or the beach or a street or a place in a room, a family scene, whatever it is you're shooting, what is in front of you is really unique. And because it is a piece of the life of the people in front of the camera, and it's a piece in the existence, in their existence and in life. And you do something that in its essence is almost holy or sacred. You take a piece of life and you repeat it, and you show it again to somebody else afterwards. You take something that by nature is totally unique, and life is something sacred. Life is always sacred. Everybody's life in this room and everywhere else in Kerala or in the world is sacred. So you do something that many of us take for granted. We all take filmmaking for granted, and now we take pictures with our iPhones, and we all do it so often. We've lost that idea that it is a sacred process, that you film the unique moment of somebody's life, even if it's an actor, and even if you see playing a part. It is really something unique and sacred. And movies have that. And people in the very beginning of filmmaking felt it, and they were shocked that something so unique and sacred can be repeated. But now we've gotten used to it, and especially now in the digital age, anything can be repeated and used, so we lost a little bit of that feeling that life is sacred. And I can't help it. I put up a camera and I know it. And I know that what I'm doing, I have to earn the right to do it, and I have to do it conscientiously, and I have to myself think what kind of a process it is. And the more I realize what I'm doing, the more I'm impressed what a camera can do and what I as a director can do, and the more I'm in awe of that moment of truth that's happening. At least it is truth when you invest yourself fully, and when you know that the people in front of camera are also aware of the uniqueness of what they're doing. So if you're working out of routine, and if you work on a TV show, everybody will forget about the idea of doing anything that is remotely in a context of something sacred. Nobody thinks of it anymore. But really, that's what it is. Come to think of it, there is a transcendence involved in each moment that you do as a filmmaker. And I try to do justice to it, and I slowly learned to believe more and more in that idea, that filmmaking is connected to a certain transcendence, and that life itself is happening there, and even if it's just a tree and it's not a person, it is just as holy as that tree. And anything alive is unique, and movies can capture that. And I always think it's awesome, and I want to do justice to it. And the older I get, the more I'm scared to even set up a camera and not think of it. And in the digital age, it's easy to forget it. Thank you.
She wants. You want to ask
Yeah.
her? Yeah.
And as you mentioned, the solitude, the importance of solitude. What is the rituals or how are you connected with the sacred? How are you connecting with the sacred?
I don't think you have to try to connect. It's there anyway. I mean, the very idea that life is unique and that it only happens once and every moment is in the present tense, and only movies can take it out and repeat it. There's nothing else that can do that. What movies can do. I mean, you can look at film history and realize you can look back in time. You can go back in time. You can go back in the culture of a people. You can go back in your own culture and you see something that happened. And in the old days, people were more aware of the act of filming something. They're more aware of it than most people today. And I think it's such a treasure that you can go back in the history of your own region, of your own culture, of India, or wherever you live, and that is available to you. So I think we owe to cinema to be more impressed by what we're doing.
One of the things which absolutely fascinates me that you started in the age of Pull-X, 16mm, 35. You even shot on a DV camera. Buena Vista Social Club was on a DV and a Digibeta. You've never really, when I look back, when I have to make a film, I always try and see what is the best format, or somewhere that aspect gets on to me rather than just moving with what you have, or is that something which you really think about, or you think about it's more important to capture with any tool, or how does that come to you?
Well, there's a thing about film, and then for a while there was only film. That was the only way you had to capture reality. For about 100 years there was just film, and then video came up, and then digital. But what I was going to say is, I think most films try to capture their own time. I mean, of course there are historic films and they go back in time, but most films take place at their own period. Most films, like right now. So, and I always felt that you could best capture the spirit of your own time and the temperature of the period where you were living in with the tools of that time. So when video came up, I thought it was interesting. It was not as good technically as film, but it had a different way to capture something that was contemporary. And then digital tools came up, and again I felt with these digital tools you could film contemporary life in a more appropriate way, and it almost became a little bit nostalgic to film contemporary life on film, because I felt even on an iPhone or on a smartphone you can catch something if you film today that a film camera couldn't do that well. So I always feel that the technology as it's evolving has a relation to the reality of your day. So I felt that a lot of the tools I got to know in the course of my filmmaking career, I was happy that I had no instruments, because I felt they had a different access to the life of people. And I feel now that a digital camera has access to reality and is more immediate than if you take up a film camera and use a photochemical process to reach reality today. So I think there is a relation between contemporary life and the technology of each as it is evolving. So I was always curious what these new technologies were adding to my palette, and if I could do something that I couldn't do before. And I feel that always have enriched what I can do to have access to the present tense.
Hello. Yeah.
Listen,
Mr.
Mr.
Wenders. Yeah, it's an absolute honor to listen to you. Yeah. My question is, could you please elaborate to us your working relationship with your cinematographer Robbie Muller? Because a few years back, I had the good fortune of being in Robbie Muller's exhibition in I Museum, and I also got another chance to look at his Polaroids in a separate exhibition. And you are a photographer yourself, and you shoot a lot of Polaroids. So a lot of budding filmmakers out here who also sometimes shoot our own stuff and who want to work with cinematographers in different of different generations. So it would be nice to listen or to hear from you about Robbie Muller, because I feel that he creates amazing, startling images with almost effortless ease. And before you start, I also want to show you that some of us still shoot with the old Bolex that you shoot with. A lot of us here still work with the 100 feet Bolex. So please tell us about your relationship with Robbie Muller.
Robbie was Dutch. You have to remember that. He was a Dutch director of photography, and he loved Dutch painting. And we connected first because we both realized we loved painting more than our own profession. We thought painting was the hugest inspiration for anybody who wanted to produce an image, if it was a film image or a photographic image or a Polaroid. We both had the idea in our head that the most beautiful work with light and colors was produced by Dutch painters. So we connected in a big way with our own references. Our own reference, the ideal filmmaker or the ideal cameraman ever for us was Vermeer. And we never saw anybody who had caught a portrait of a person in a more loving and more complete way than this painter. So that's where we started. And I got to know Robbie when I had myself shot on my Bolex quite long, for years already, for 2 or 3 years, and I'd never worked with a cameraman. I didn't have the means. I was still in film school. To make a film with a real cameraman was a dream. And in my last year in film school, I got a job on an American movie that was shooting in the city of Munich, and I applied for as an extra for the film. And because I had very long hair, I looked like Jimi Hendrix, I got a part of a student leader. I mean, that was not what I was, but they thought I looked like a badass student, so they cast me, and I even had a speaking part, and I was shooting for 3 days. So for 3 days, I was, for the first time, able to see a professional crew. Never seen any actual professional movie crew. So I watched the cameraman, which was an old Dutch person, and I thought he was impressive. But I was more interested in his assistant, because I had worked on my own Bolex all the time, and all the time, if you work on a camera like this, a 60mm camera or film camera, you constantly have to look for the focus, and you have to work on your lens, and it's a terrible job to be in focus all the time. And of course, I missed the focus quite often. So I looked at the camera assistant because I wanted to know how is he doing it. And there he was with one hand at the lens, like I thought they were doing, and he was following focus, and he was looking and attentive, and he had long hair, and I thought he looked damn cool. But then I realized the coolest thing was he did it with one hand, and the other hand he had in his pocket. And he was doing something, and then he realized he was rolling a cigarette. While he was pulling focus, he was rolling a cigarette. And then the director said, cut, and he pulled out the cigarette and lit it with one hand. And I thought, wow, that's the coolest dude I've ever seen. And in between a take, I told him I was a student in the film school there, and I asked him if I could if he could possibly work with me on my next student film. And that was the first time Robbie was offered to work as a DOP. And he said, I've never done it, but gladly, yes, let's do it. And we did my very first film in 35mm together, which was a short film called Alabama. And that was the first time I had a cameraman. It was so fantastic. And Robbie, we shot it in black and white because that was cheaper at the time. And it was beautiful, it was so much better than all the shots I'd done myself, but because he knew where to put the lights in. It was such a pleasure, and then we shot the next 20 films together. And we learned so much together. We shot so much together and continued, and each film was based on the one experience before, and we continued to learn together. And when Robbie shot Alice in the Cities with me, that's when he had his first Polaroid camera, because we were giving a prototype Polaroid camera for the film, because that camera in the film did not exist yet. And Robbie also got one of these cameras and some Polaroid films, and Robbie's Polaroids were fantastic. He was really a genius with light, and he had a fantastic eye, and we really loved each other and were like twin brothers. But eventually, when I started to work in America, Robbie was not in the union there, and I had to do some films with other people because Robbie did not want to shoot a film with union rules in America. So for a number of years we were apart, and then we worked together after 4 or 5 years of not working with each other on Paris, Texas, and that was Robbie's greatest film ever, I think.
Also, with his contribution, you mentioned about the Kinofloss and also the viewfinder. I think that would be an interesting story too. Yeah,
Robbie was an inventor because each movie he saw as a new challenge, and he tried to come up with light that was really specific for the director and for the story that he was doing. And in Paris, Texas, already in American Friend in American Friend, Robbie, we shot in some tight spaces, and Robbie wanted to create some very soft, diffuse light, and he did something. He used neon lights and took them out of their fixtures, just the bulb, and glued them to the wall. And it gave an interesting effect. He could do a light behind a door, and he could put another neon tube on the floor or in some corners. So he was hiding them everywhere in the set, and he started to light whole scenes with neon tubes. And then one day we got a visit by the guy who gave us all the light equipment for the film, and he saw the set and all the neon tubes and said, "Robbie, what are you doing?" And Robbie said, "This is interesting because it has a very different quality. The light is different in the room if you have all these neon lights. They're weak, they don't give much light, but they add something to the glow of the image." And the guy thought that's an interesting idea. And the next year he produced Kinofloss, which are then used for the next 30 years as a regular equipment for DOPs. And it was Robbie's invention, really. He marketed what Robbie had done. So Robbie was a genius.
And your invention of the viewfinder.
Yes. In another film of ours, Kings of the Road, was a black and white film. And for a director and a cameraman to be out in the landscape and look for a shot, you need a viewfinder. And then you hold it in front of your eyes, and then you pass it on. But already as you pass it on, your cameraman sort of has to focus himself and try to see the same thing you saw, and it was not satisfying. And we said, wouldn't it be nice if you could see through the actual lens that we're going to use in the film? And we thought, yes. So we continued our location survey by getting an ARRI camera, and always had to take the ARRI camera on our shoulders to find the set. There was no film in it. We just used the camera as a viewfinder. And then Robbie said, "This sucks. It's way too heavy." And you see, the camera has a little optical system that is attached to the body. If we took that out and put the lens in front, we would just have this stick and the actual lens, and we could look through the actual lens, and I could give it to you, and you could show me something. Wouldn't it be great to have a viewfinder with the actual lens? And then we went to Ari and said, "Can you build that to us? I mean, just the optical system of the camera, and that would be a perfect viewfinder." And they thought, and I said, "Well, do you think so? We can build it for you, but I don't know if anybody else wants that." Little did they know, as soon as they built the prototype, every DOP saw Robbie with it on some photograph, and they all wanted to it. And the next thing, it became very successful for Ari to build thousands. And it became the standard viewfinder. And now anybody who is on location and wants to find a shot, he can have the lenses with them, and the real lenses, because it's such a different thing to look at your shot through the actual lens or look at a location and you use the real lens that you're using. It's a different feeling. So it is now standard, but Robbie came up with it out of sheer necessity.
I think we can have a last question.
A last already?
Second last? You want to do second last?
Second last. I have a question about the boat. Let's
Sir, good evening.
Okay, you go.
You have been born in Germany and brought up in a troublesome period of the world, Second World War and post-war period. You are one of the few living artists of the period of Nazism and fascism. As an artist who is talking about love, affection, friendship among the people and travel throughout the world as a human being, beyond the borders, what do you want to tell about the current trend of the world and India, the role of cinema as a powerful media?
Well, you already answered it. Cinema is a powerful medium. And, you know, I was born right after the war. I was born in the week when there was 2 atom bombs being released on Japanese cities. That's the week I was born, to locate it in history. And somehow I always took that as a sign. And I remember that we were very poor, and we were living in a ruin, and the whole city around me was in ruins. And if I now see pictures of Ukrainian cities or the Gaza Strip, I'm shocked, because that's how I grew up, in ruins, nothing but ruins. I thought the world was like it. And only then, through photographs and newspapers and in the encyclopedia of my grandfather, I detected the world really didn't look like what I knew. It really was much more beautiful everywhere else. So I grew up in a period where I realized you can't take anything for granted. And I grew up in a time in Germany when people were so happy that the horror was over and that they could start building up something again. And I grew up in a time when people were really all equal. There was no superiors and no inferiors, there was no classes. People were equal. We all had nothing, and people helped each other, and people were a real society of equals. And that's how I grew up, and the older I was, the more I missed it, because it then disappeared, that feeling. And I'm horrified how we're all living in Western civilization today, and people are no longer equal at all. People are not equal on this planet, and we move away from that state that I lived as a child almost in paradise. I felt a society where everybody was equal was so beautiful. And now I miss it, and I feel cinema can give us back the idea that people are equal.
Hello, sir.
Where are
At the
you?
back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to India. Is it possible for you to share a dream project that you were not able to do all these years? And will you be able to do a film on India based in India? Thank you.
Yeah. I thought I should talk to Shivendra first. No. I said before that for me most movies start with a sense of place and with a place that would like me to tell a story there. So this is way too early. I'm just on my 5th day in India. Sixth day it is now, thank you. So we still have 3 weeks ahead, and afterwards I will know a little bit more. But yes, there is projects that I have in mind, especially one I have in mind for a long time, that I do want to shoot in different places of the world, and it's a science fiction film that takes place in the future, and it's in the future when miraculously there is deep peace all over the world, and there is no differences in classes, and people are equal, and there is no more extreme poverty, and there is no more weapons, and there is no more violence. So instead of explaining how to get there, I thought maybe showing the state of peace on planet Earth, and you can only do that in the future. Maybe to show a state of peace would help people today to see how much they would want that, and how much they've forgotten that they would want that. So I do have a project that is a science fiction film that I want to shoot in different parts of the world. And yes, why not here as well? I'm very impressed by by the people, especially that I've met in the last 5.5 days, now 6 days. So just wait and see a little bit.
One last question.
Hi, good evening. And by the time I got the mic, I got some bits of the answers actually I expected, but still I would love to hear from you. That regarding Perfect Days, I have read somewhere that when asked what led you to the making of that film with a toilet cleaner as the protagonist, you said social commitment. So usually when we think about social commitment, we concentrate on suffering, then our anger towards the hierarchy, and we end up in frustration. But Perfect Days is such a beautiful film. You can't expect any kind of frustration at the end of the movie. And it shows a new perspective to the society, that there is an inner life which is equally valuable as anybody else's. With anybody, that can happen. So it is actually, I think it's an overhauling idea that you have thrown to the world. So when you decide to make films on such stories, what is actually your line of thought? Or is it a moment of epiphany that you decide that I will work on this theme for the film? Or is there a line of thought? I would love to hear it from you.
That particular film came about because I love Japanese culture, and I love the sense of the small, and the sense and the ethic of a craftsman, and the idea that craftspeople in Japan are real national heroes, and that there's a sense for little things, even a sense of something as ephemeris as the sun shining through the leaves and leaving a little spectacle on the floor or on the wall. So there is a sense for small things, and there is a great sense of the common good in Japan. And when I came to Japan for a suggestion to make a film on this social project, which was these public toilets built by famous architects, and I was asked to come and look at these toilets and their architects and maybe do some sort of film on these architects and their creations. And it was after the pandemic in Europe, and we had all come out of the difficult times, and in my own country and in Europe I realized the pandemic had had a very bad effect on society. the carelessness with people's behavior in public was scary. The little park where I lived, when pandemic was over, or when the deadlock, when people were able to have parties again in the open, the little park in my area in Berlin where I live was destroyed by partying. People were reckless in public, and more so I feel. People have lost a whole sense of decency, I feel, in the Western world, in America as well. And then I came to Japan, and this was the first week in which the Japanese came out of the longest, what's the word in lockdown? The longest lockdown of any city was Tokyo. And they came out, and they were jubilant to be out in the open, and they had parties. And they were out in parks and had parties. And at the end of every party, and the park was cleaner than before. There are no garbage cans in Tokyo because people take their own garbage, and places were immaculate afterwards. And these little parks where the toilets are were pristine. And the toilets are used by homeless, and they take care of them, and they're clean when they use them, because they're happy that they have this. So there was a different sense of a common good that I realized in Japan when I was there, to make maybe a documentary on toilets and architects. And I said, no, I'm not here in order to make a film on toilets and architects. There's something much more beautiful that I'm witnessing here, which is a sense of society and their own common good. And that was so intact in Japan after the lockdown, and in my own city was so painfully not working anymore, that I said, that's what I want to do. I want to make a film. These toilets can appear, but not the architects, but the toilets. And I'd rather make a film about the common good and represented by a character who takes care of these toilets. Just like a craftsman who is proud of what he's doing, even if he's doing the same every day. I want to show such a character and sort of have it as an ode to everyday routine, and as an ode to a person who is dedicated to the values of the common good. And that's what the film became. I imagined the character, he was an invention, but the actors studied the real person who cleaned it and spent a week with him cleaning toilets, and at the end he was very, very good at it. And he became that character so well that he allowed me to do this film on him as if it was a documentary. And it became, in a strange way, a more utopian film that I had hoped it could be, but it became the utopia of a social commitment that I really thought maybe the film could become, and it became more that than I had hoped in my wildest dreams. But it just happened, and it happened because of the commitment of my actor, and because he let me turn a fictional film into a documentary. And it was a documentary that had a real base in Japan. So, and I love Tokyo, and it's one of my favorite cities, and I love the cinema of Yasujiro Ozu, and that is my declared cinematic master, and I made the film in his spirit. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Ren. We can go on hearing you, but I want to end the session with asking you, you've seen Mumbai, you've heard Trivandrum, what do you think about Kerala?
I think it's quite amazing. I mean, my wife and I were strolling around for a few hours, and this is just a first impression, I'm sorry. But there is something here that I haven't seen in any city for such a long time. The greatest places we saw were all hospitals and educational places, and that seemed very different to me than in other cities I've seen. We've wandered around and seen 3 hospitals, and I couldn't believe it. They were all beautiful. They were like the banks look somewhere else. And so I must say I like it so far, and I think I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. Thank you, Donata. We also have, not along with Wim, we have Donata Wenders, an artist. Let's welcome her. Hella Wenders and Claire, both they head the foundation. Because of them, we are seeing these wonderful films. Mehdi, the entire crew from Germany who've come. I want to thank very much the Chalachitra Academy for giving us this wonderful theatres, the Kairali Complex, Mr. Shaji Karun, the Academy, from the chairman and from everyone, and Shaji, all of you who put in a lot of effort. But most important, Said Saab from the Gatha. He's been so supportive. I can't but thank you for being there with us and making this possible. And thank you so much, Wim, for this wonderful words. I mean, each time I sit in every session, I don't want to leave, but I want to keep hearing you. I'm so sorry, it's only 2 hours. But isn't it like a film? I mean, it's absolutely like how his movies are. I also have an important announcement that there will be a Q&A today on Anselm, and tomorrow we'll only have 2 Q&As, Wings of Desire and Paris, Texas. So they will be on both those films, there will be a Q&A. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give Wim Wenders a big standing ovation. Thanks. Please, Wim. That's for you.
Thank you. Shivendra, you cannot tell people